I apologize for being a few minutes late. Got tied up. I wanted to, we'll go ahead and start our public hearing. So at this time I'll call a public hearing to order. Anyone present?
I did previously, so I can present on this.
Have y'all already had it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Man went on without it.
You could.
You could have.
We could.
Could be good.
I think you discussed this at your June 15th meeting and then called for the public hearing today because it was an ordinance change that didn't require a public hearing, but you went ahead and called for one. And this, I put it up on the screen, is the recommended change from the for the agricultural district ordinance, and it just removes the the limit on the number of consecutive terms that can be served to allow some of those that have experience and consistency with this to continue to serve.
And I know this is something that we have worked hard to try to secure these names, and I'm very appreciative of the staff to make this change. It should help us in trying to get some names.
And one good news, we're having a public hearing, and you're used to during all of the remote meetings during COVID, you had to wait 24 hours to then vote on this, but that 24-hour rule is no longer in place. They did away with it, so you are able to take action today, I think, when this is on your agenda.
Is there anyone here today that would like to speak concerning the Agriculture Advisory Board ordinance amendments? I don't hear any. Do I have a motion that we adjourn the public hearing?
I move that we adjourn the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now we'll go ahead and start our regular scheduled meeting. I'll go ahead and call to order the Jackson County Board of Commissioners regular meeting. First item of business today is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda today or corrections? Hearing none, then we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Any question or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Next is the approval of the minutes. You should have work session minutes from June the 8th and then our regular meeting minutes from June 15th. After having had a chance to review those as distributed by the clerk, what's the pleasure of the board?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Okay, have a motion to accept. Is there a second?
Second.
Any question or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Administrative reports, I don't have anything to report today. I'll start with Commissioner Strickland today.
I have nothing to report today.
All right,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jones.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Dietz and I had the privilege of attending the Seeds and Soil Networking, Community Networking sessions at WCU. It was hosted by Chancellor Dr. Kelly Brown, and it was a great opportunity for nonprofits in our community to come together. There was a lot of very practical and informative information shared, and networking took place. And this is just the start of I think, a very good effort in Jackson County to meet the needs of our community and to be real proactive in some of these. And this was just the first meeting. They've already scheduled a follow-up on October 21st. So we hope this is one of those one and done things, but this is just the start of a real ongoing effort to coordinate our nonprofits.
Was there a good attendance?
There was an excellent attendance, didn't you think? I think,
Yes.
I thought it was well
Very
attended.
good. Very good.
Yeah. And I think there were over 20 different organizations in a wide range of different kinds of organizations. So I think it was very well.
And were there questions, I know prior to that event at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about, the American Recovery Plan. And
Yes.
the potential for funding and applications, and were there questions that came to you about that?
Yes, there were, and they allowed me to make the announcement that we had agreed to that at some point in the near future, there would be a simple RFP process through our county manager's office, and that people could apply for funds, and that we encourage them to really be thinking ahead to that opportunity, but also realize that there were two, one, that they had to serve Jackson County residents, and secondly, that their board of directors reflected their participation by Jackson County residents as well.
Okay, very good. Mr. Deeds?
Oh, I'm sorry, I have one.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
I attended the Board of Health meeting last night, and it was really an excellent meeting. We had some really good news that the health clinic now at our Jackson County Department of Public Health is fully staffed. And that's the first time in quite a while that that's been the case. And they felt like it was a direct result of our County Board of Commissioners being willing to change some of the classification of those positions. And our county manager had suggested that, and it certainly showed because they were able to hire those nurses. And two of the nurses that they've hired, there's two nurse practitioners that are experienced. Two of the nurses they've hired are first-time nurses. And so they're very excited about introducing them to public health and hope that they can have a long-term relationship with them. They also reported that the Delta variant is here in Jackson County. And we know this because of the wastewater treatment. And as you are aware, former Commissioner Ron Mao had encouraged us to participate through a grant opportunity in testing the wastewater for COVID-19. And we have been involved in that. And you will be pleased to know that the CDC is now looking at that data from Jackson County, because we were one of that first group that had done that. They're looking at that data, and it's a small amount, but they were able to detect that we do have the Delta variant here. And what that means for us, we can't pinpoint exactly where. Obviously, it's in that whole TWASA system that they test, but it does say that this is something we need to be concerned about in Jackson County, and that the health department is now taking steps to make sure that providers are aware and can look for that. Two big issues is we really want to see more people get the vaccine. And the barriers to that are lots, and we went into a long discussion about that, which I won't reiterate here. But what we decided to look at were, where are the influencers in Jackson County that could maybe help change people's desire to have it. And we identified one would be primary care physicians. And so the health department's gonna reach out to all our primary care physicians. Many of them are already doing this, but every patient they see, encourage them in a positive way to get vaccinated. And the second thing, which would be for ministers of the different congregations in Jackson County, encourage some of them that will to encourage their congregants also to be vaccinated. The health department is offering the summer card program, which is money from the federal government that came to the state, $25 if you get vaccinated. And if the person that drives you there, they also can get $25 gift card. One-time thing, just as an incentive to get some people out. And then really quick, last two things. Tuesday, a week from today, Dr. Jerry Wolf Highway dedication is at 2 o'clock, and it's on the Qualla Boundary and it's, the location is right below the Mossy Justice Center. There's a place in the road there. And, is that right, Mr. Cooper?
That's my
Yeah.
understanding.
Yes.
Yes.
And so we're hoping that as many of us as Board of Commissioners can be there to celebrate this, 2 p.m. Tuesday. And then, just a reminder that, Monday, a week from yesterday, the Southwest Commission Annual Barbecue will be held in Franklin at 5:30.
Thank you for those reports.
Could we take a recess
We sure can. Commissioner Deeds, you have to follow that, so.
Well, I'm 72 and I'm getting long-winded. I have been. First of all, Bogarts, y'all are familiar with it, having a fire this past week. And there's a lot to be said about that. And the fireman that was able to extinguish that must have been pretty quick. Then I noticed they've got a group down there that's cleaning that thing and working hard on it. So they might, I haven't talked to Tim. I did the next day. And that the thing that you know, the biggest impact, there's 41 people. He had 41 employees. They didn't have 41 full-time employees, but some of them are part-time college kids and stuff. So that's 41 people come to work the next morning that couldn't come to work. So I told him any way we could help him. I don't know what that'd be, Mr. Adams, but anyway, we need to sit and help him get back on his feet. And the other thing is, Casey and Steve, I played Little League, Senior League baseball. I'm probably the only fellow that was at bat, and the pitcher called timeout, which was Doug Brooks, and he wanted to meet with me at the mound. So I was the batter, and he was the pitcher, and he said, "Boys, he knew I could hit a bull in the butt, and he wanted to know what kind of pitch he could throw to me so I could get a hit before the season was over." And I told him not to throw a curve, I couldn't hit that. Throw a fastball, don't throw it fast. And I got a single. They had a picture of Silver Hurl, me and Doug Brooks standing on the mountain talking to each other, two different things. I talk about Cal Rock. He's a great nephew of mine that got pulled up to the Seattle Mariners a week ago to the major leagues. And I know Stephanie and Todd, who run a business here, they're real proud of them. And the county, I think, should be. And hopefully he'll do well. And that says much for our county and for him and the type of fellow he is. That's all I have.
Now we'll take a recess.
Yeah.
Good report. Okay, we'll hear from our county manager. That's right.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, hope everybody's doing well. I have some standard information and a couple additional items for your consideration or review. Enclosed in your package, you should see in the manager's report the standard June 2021 zoning and building permits. I'll scroll down to it. Just a reminder, this shows zoning districts of applicable, the owner, business name, and the permits issued. So the planning department issued 3 commercial zoning permits and 1 renovation addition permit in the month of June. Code enforcement issued 5 commercial permits and 6 renovation addition permits in the month of June. Next item is, if you haven't noticed out here up front at our law enforcement memorial, Randy Cave and our landscaping crew improved the aesthetics around this memorial. And then we also had Kevin Morgan and our maintenance crew add additional flagpoles. County staff did an excellent job. Please go down there and take a look at it. It's a beautiful addition as far as the aesthetics. And then the flagpoles, you know, when we get calls from either federal or state government to put our flags at half-mast, there used to be a single pole there. And so what would happen with the 3 flags on there, when you do a half-mast with another flag, you would have the other flags almost on the ground, which is also not appropriate for flags to be on the ground. So Ultimately, maintenance did a great job of just putting some additional poles up there and getting the appropriate lighting and everything. So I just want to give kudos to them.
And if you'll pause at that point on that picture, I also would mention that, in that area, if you'll notice in the center of the photo is the two headstones. One that has the inscription about the deceased law enforcement who died in the line of duty, and then on the right side, it talks about their names and when they served and the date of deceased. But to the left of that monument is a stone, and that stone, unfortunately, was in the back of the building. It was sort of hidden, and it was in memory of other county employees, non-law enforcement, that have died over the years. And so I was very pleased that maintenance also pulled that out to the front and included it in that area, so it's more prominent and can be seen, and for people to be able to go out and remember their coworkers that have passed.
It really does look nice.
Next item, just showing the board, this is something as we were building out the community service center, our health department, code enforcement. If you recall, we had conversations and discussions about whether or not that facility was going to be energy efficient. If you also recall, we had worked with Duke Energy and an engineer to make sure that we were installing energy efficient lighting, things of that nature. And so I just thought I'd provide to you the validation report. Basically, at the end of the construction period, you have to bring the engineers back in and validate that everything was installed properly. It was installed properly. We will see a return on investment between 2 and 3 years. And so basically just thought I'd inform the board that we do have energy efficient lighting, light switches, all the way to 10 on the glass, the multiple items where we're energy efficient. Next item of discussion is in regards to just ongoing construction projects. The Animal Rescue Center, Green Energy Park is 19% complete through June 18th. I have to figure out when to start presenting this. We always end up having our monthly meeting the day after this Tuesday, so I might have to start. So I'm almost a month behind all the time with the information that I did do. We are just running into rain, constant rain. Everything on the first part of this project is about grading, storm sewer, and things of that nature. But having said all that, we're still projected to be February 22. What you do have included in here is just the architect's report from July 9th. Before I reported to you, the main floor was poured, but the next part of the floor is the outside area plus with the footings. And so that was, I went ahead and downloaded some other pictures. They did, I believe, July 14th, July 15th. They did end up pouring the outside of the facility and the footings themselves. So they've been pouring at night because they just feel like they can get it finished before the sun and rain comes out the next day. So they at least got the pad poured and we're proceeding forward. And we're still looking for the appropriate weather to continue on with the storm sewer and the retaining walls, and they're still working in other areas. I'm gonna scroll. I'm gonna scroll back up. I don't have any more attachments there. The Blue Ridge School Water and Sewer Project, I'm happy to report that the project was completed within budget and within required time frame. So in today's conversations, that is just an awesome thing to be able to say. Just a reminder, it's a $1.2 million project for a waste treatment facility and a water pressure pump for the Blue Ridge School. They did complete everything. We did get a CDBG grant. They completed everything by July 9th, so we'll get 100% reimbursed for the CDBG grant. I just want to recognize planning staff. CDBG monies, community development block grant monies, are very complex administratively, and people such as our planning staff, our finance officer, Darlene Fox, did an excellent job weaving through all of that paperwork. And then, of course, Victor Lockquist and Steelwood Enterprises for basically doing what it took to get the job done so that we could get reimbursed by CDBG. So we really appreciate it. Everything's online and operating. The Fairview concession stand replacement project, is obviously started. We should be ready to send out the bid by mid-August, and it's anticipated to award the contract by the end of September. The final thing is a request for qualifications for architectural services related to this facility will be released July 29th. That's a week from Thursday. And it's generally about a month process, and that's basically getting proposals from architects in regards to how do you plan out this facility. This goes to the last major item that was on the CIP, capital improvement plan, as far as reviewing additional court space and other needs in this facility. That is something that'll be a fairly long-term process as we go through that. A couple things you note that you see it's not on here is the indoor pool. We are very close to getting done with the finalized schematics. You know, nothing major has changed from what was actually presented to the public and voted on. But now we've narrowed down, got really into the details. I mean, things like how big is the cover on the entrance, main entrance, when you're discussing, you know, when kids are hanging out outside or whoever hanging out to get picked up from the indoor pool. These are the types of details that are getting worked out. And we're very close to getting all that done. And I'm hoping by next month, I'll actually come back to you with some updated renditions, updated timeline. Just again, it won't be significantly different from what the voters voted on. It'll just be more detailed. And hopefully I'll be able to provide that information to the board. And a couple other notes that I didn't put in writing in my report, but I wanted to go ahead and just get it on the radar of this board. As discussed before, Commissioner Woody had mentioned in regards to talking to the nonprofits and having a request for proposals for our ARPA funds. Well, August 10th is when I'm going to come to the board and discuss in general terms the federal stimulus money, the ARPA funds with the Board of Commissioners. The idea being was I was going to try to get general consensus. If you recall, there's going to be a human services priority here. We're also going to talk about other things as far as nonprofits and other things such as broadband and business development. I'll present all this to you for discussion August 10th. But under the human services component, that really is going to focus on domestic violence and also focus on homelessness and also focus on child services. Well, what has happened in the last week or so, or maybe 2 weeks, is that Dogwood Trust Foundation has specifically come out with a program geared towards counties, municipalities, and also the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians as it relates to housing. And ultimately, it really centers in, they're looking to try to match their dollars specifically one-to-one with ARPA funds. And they're specifically targeting areas that Jackson County has already been moving towards. And the reason I mention that is in the next 2 meetings, I'm going to be bringing quite a bit of information to you. Normally, this would be something that we'd show up August 10th at a work session. We'd be able to discuss for a couple meetings. But the deadline on some of these grants is August 16th. And the reality is if we're wanting to take advantage and get matching dollars to our funds, we need to start having these discussions now. So just let the board know that will be coming to you for immediate discussion that I just can't hold on. Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Any questions for the manager?
I would take from your comments that these ARP funds can be used as a match then for these the Dogwood plan.
Yeah, so
It
they
is
can,
allowable to use it as a match.
well, they can be used for the domestic violence and the homeless operation. So first of all, we can utilize those funds for that operation. And then Dogwood monies, yes, can be matched. These are not federal dollars.
No, I'm talking about the ARP funds.
Yeah.
Is that within the parameters of usage
Oh,
to
absolutely.
use as match?
Yes.
Okay.
The reason I mentioned,
That's all I want.
it gets a little complicated if you're trying to match other federal dollars. But
Okay,
Dogwood is not other federal dollars.
right,
So yes,
okay.
this would be a great potential partnership between Dogwood's initiative and the county's initiative in regards to the areas mentioned. So, yes, they're not, and again, they're not federal dollars, so yes, it's all open.
Other questions? on the board? Okay, well, thank you, sir, for your report.
And nobody has signed up.
Okay, have no one signed up for informal comments, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. The only item we have today is a tax collector and refund report for June 2021. We'll recognize Ms. Brandy Henson, our tax collector. Welcome.
Good afternoon. The June 2021 report, the 2020 taxes collected for the month were $148,129.56. The delinquent taxes collected were $88,465.09. The total deposited for June was $246,479.82. Also for the month, there were refunds of $1,262.04 and overpayment refunds of $3,081.70. And we ended the year with a tax collection rate of 98.78%, which was 0.72 higher than last year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you've heard the report from our tax collector. What would be the pleasure of the board concerning item 1 that's under the consent agenda? Have a motion to approve?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Hearing none then, Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Deeds?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Strickland?
Yes.
Chairman Knight?
Yes, motion carries. Okay, next under new business, item 2. This is closing North Carolina's health insurance gap. We have some presenters here today. I'd like to welcome to the podium Mr. Casey Cooper, who's the CEO of Cherokee Hospital, and also Mr. Steve Heatherly, who's the CEO of Paris Regional Hospital. And appreciate them being here today and confident with the companion resolution that we have for our consideration.
Oh, could I have one of those copies? I'm sorry, I didn't. Yeah.
I like standing at a podium, so if you just sit around the podium.
And Don, you can minimize that little box if you want to.
This one?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
one.
just minimize it.
Okay.
Yeah, that one
Yeah.
right there.
Is that the button?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Sometimes. So first of all, Chairman McMahon and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to be with you and to share a little bit of information. Before I get started, just a little bit about who I am. I'm Casey Cooper. I'm the CEO of the Cherokee Hospital. I was born and raised there in Cherokee, and I've been the CEO for probably about 18 years now, and I've worked in the health system for my entire career, with the exception of a couple of years that I worked at Harris Regional Hospital. I was in elementary school when Miss Woody taught in elementary school. I played midget mite football with Coach Deeds, with Coach Lynn Swain. I wrestled at Civil Webster when Steve Jones was the coach at Civil Webster. I was, and I'm proud to tell you that in 1989, I was Jackson County's most outstanding citizen. I still have the plaque to prove it. I'm very proud of that. But the most important thing I can tell you is that I'm Jill's husband, and I'm Kate, Jack, and Mary's daddy. And I'm really delighted to be here. And I'm really glad that Steve, my friend and colleague from Duke La Pointe, Harris Swain, was willing to come and be in support while we have this discussion. Coach, I'm going to do my best to throw you a soft pitch that you won't miss. I am satisfied that if we believe the data, this is a soft pitch that we can all hit. The intent of the presentation this morning, I'm here on behalf of the Cherokee Indian Hospital Authority and the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians to ask for your support in the form of passing this resolution. You have the boilerplate resolution probably in your packet that was provided by Care for Carolinas, the largest statewide coalition on closing the coverage gap. We believe it's necessary to close the coverage gap. The data that I'm going to share with you primarily comes from a study that was commissioned by KB Reynolds and Cone Health and was conducted by George Washington University. So most of the data that I'm going to share with you comes from there. You've probably already seen this data. According to this data, in Jackson County, approximately 18.2% of working non-elderly adults are uninsured, which means about 3,200 people would gain access to coverage with expansion of Medicaid in North Carolina. And again, expansion just means expanding Medicaid to those adults who are less than the age of 65, who are below 133% of the federal poverty level. It's also estimated, according to George Washington University, that Medicaid expansion would create about 263 jobs in Jackson County and would lead to almost $500,000 in additional county revenue and about $37 million a year in new business activity. I will be very transparent and tell you that my primary motivation for being here is that failing to expand Medicaid is currently costing the Eastern Band about $7 million a year. Okay. And it is costing us that amount. This is not an opportunity cost for new revenue. This is a current expenditure. We are providing more than that to beneficiaries who would qualify if there was expansion of Medicaid, and 100% of that cost is being paid by the Eastern Band, the Cherokee Indians. And I'll share with you a little bit more about that. But that's at least $7 million a year that the Eastern Band would love to put into economic development, jobs creation, broadband, and infrastructure in Western North Carolina. But unfortunately, because of this policy around expansion, the tribe is actually having to fund the federal government's legal and moral obligation to provide health care for American Indians. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. So some things that I'm sure you're familiar with is that in the western part of the state, we are disproportionately adversely affected by a lack of coverage. Although Jackson County is not in the top 10 worst covered counties, Jackson County's, it's estimated that your working uninsured population is about 18.2%, but certainly all the neighboring counties and certainly the counties that feed the health system here in Jackson County are certainly disproportionately affected by a lack of coverage. You can see here that Graham County ranks third worst in the state. Cherokee County is in the top 5 or 6, and then Swain County, you can see, has a 22.9% uninsured rate. Again, Jackson County falls just outside of this, but not by much. And I know that Steve's probably got some figures that he'll share with you later about what they think the effect of Medicaid expansion could be on the DLP system here. So who are we talking about? And one of the things I want to do, and I apologize for being horribly overt about this, but I'm just going to shoot straight with you. When we talk about closing the coverage gap, a lot of times there's this narrative or this connotation that we're talking about able-bodied adults who could work and get group employee health insurance. They're just too trifling and lazy to do so. And that is not the case. The data proves that is not the situation. What we're talking about are people that are working but cannot afford coverage on the exchange because they make too much money for Medicaid but not enough money for the federal subsidies to make insurance on the exchange affordable to them. Or they work in areas where they don't have access to group employee health insurance. So this slide just shows you some examples of what that looks like. For example, for a mother with a child, if she makes more than $7,200 a year, she's in this gap. And that mom and that baby, if she tried to buy insurance, the monthly premium would cost her between $400 and $500 a month, and she would have a maximum out of pocket of $8,500 a year in addition to those monthly premiums. Well, there's no way. It's just not affordable. And that's why so many of our moms, particularly our single moms, are going without coverage right now. There are moms, you probably know them. They made sure their babies had coverage, their babies are on Medicaid, and these moms don't have coverage. So this is just expanding on that a little bit more about how a parent would fall into the coverage gap. And again, the intent of the Affordable Care Act was that all the states would expand Medicaid up to 133% of the federal poverty level, and then that would provide some benefit for every demographic until the subsidies kicked in. So here's some data that shows you, this is some data from Kaiser Family Foundation that shows you that 63% of the uninsured are working, okay? We're not talking about the trifling and the lazy. We're talking about working people who can't afford coverage. And we can see the various occupations that they work in, the majority of which are food preparation and food service and construction. So those are, obviously, those are two industries that we have a lot in Western North Carolina. This next graph shows you the kind of the breakdown of the working uninsured by race, if you will, although it only has black or white in this particular graph. But I think in North Carolina, it's estimated that African Americans represent somewhere between 22 and 25% of the state population. So you can see that African Americans, although they may be overrepresented as uninsured in some of these industries, as a total, the largest proportion of the working uninsured are white. And I think we have to be clear about that. The next thing the next graph, and the data that I just shared with you and the data I'm sharing with you now doesn't come from the Cone Health Foundation research. This actually comes from some subsequent research that was done by Georgetown University. And in this graph, you can see that with the exception of administrative support and waste management services, the majority of the working uninsured are women. Right? We also know that unfortunately veterans represent a large proportion of the uninsured population. North Carolina has one of the highest rates of uninsured veterans in the nation, with more than 7% of its veterans lacking health coverage. There's a common misconception that all veterans have access to health care and they don't. First of all, there are geographic limitations to it, but second of all, if they don't have service-connected eligibility, they really don't have any source of coverage. The other thing that we know about Medicaid expansion and closing the coverage gap is that it's absolutely crucial for small health systems, particularly small rural health systems. And according to the Shep Center, 82% of all the rural hospital closures in the last 5 years have been in states that failed to expand Medicaid. Small rural hospitals operate on very thin profit margins. They struggle. I can tell you from experience, and I'm sure Steve will echo this, small rural hospitals really struggle to have a positive margin that will even allow for growth. Many rural hospitals in North Carolina don't even have positive profit margins. 6 rural hospitals in North Carolina have closed since 2010, and several others are at high risk. And this is because of the burden of providing uncompensated care to their communities. When those patients show up in Steve's emergency room, he takes care of them without regard to their ability to pay. Right? And unfortunately, in order to cover our costs, then we tend to have pricing that other insurers perceive to be unfair. The commercial insurance may feel like our prices are significantly above cost, but we have to make enough margin to cover the cost of all that uncompensated care that we're also providing to our communities. And it's difficult for everybody. And if we can close the coverage gap, it benefits everybody, the health systems and the insurers. This graph that I'm sharing with you came from the governor's coalition to close the coverage gap. And this data was provided by the Duke Margolis Center. And it is estimated that if North Carolina expands Medicaid, the total projected cost would be about $5 billion a year, with a ramp up in year 3 to get to roughly this $5 billion number. And I'm going to attempt to dispel another myth with this data. This $5 billion a year cost, 90% of this is paid by the federal match. The state would only have the burden of 10% of that $5 billion. And you said, well, Casey, $500 million is not, that's nothing to sneeze at. Well, first of all, I'd spend $500 million for a $5 billion return every day of the week if I had that kind of money. And I'm sure you would too, right? But more importantly, the hospitals and the insurance companies in the state of North Carolina have already agreed to pay assessments to cover the state's 10% match. So the governor and the task force have already mapped out a plan that would allow North Carolina to expand, pull down almost the full $5 billion a year in federal dollars with no increased burden on the state budget because the hospitals and health systems have agreed to pay the assessments, have agreed to pay higher assessments that would cover the state's 10% match. So one of the misconceptions that I want to try to address is, I'm sure you've heard this narrative that, you know, Medicaid expansion is just going to cost the state a bunch of money, the state can't afford it in out years. You've heard all these stories. The truth is, it is not a reality, and the state can't afford it. As a matter of fact, it would have a tremendous economic benefit to the state and the citizens. And on this slide, I want to share something that's even more important, that completely ends the economic kind of argument against expansion. In the America Rescue Plan, the Biden administration added a significant incentive to the non-expansion states to encourage them to expand. And what they offered is an additional 5% federal match on existing Medicaid. Okay, so they're going to increase the federal match on existing Medicaid, give the state a windfall of money for 8 quarters after they expand. In North Carolina, that equates to $1.7 billion. So North Carolina is going to receive this bonus, this incentive of $1.7 billion just for the decision to expand. Okay, if I go back to the previous slide, you'll see that the state burden starts out at about 300 million. In year 2, it grows to 400 million, then ultimately levels off to about 500 million. That $1.7 billion would completely fund the state's match for the next 3 to 5 years, giving the hospitals and the insurance companies the time to ramp up and prepare for the increased assessments. Okay. Another myth that I'd like to try to address, I'm sure that you've heard this, you can't trust the federal government. What if the federal government goes back on its promise to provide the 90% match? Well, anything's possible, but when the Affordable Care Act passed, it resulted in corresponding amendments to the Social Security Act, and the language in front of you is pulled directly from the Social Security Act. And you see there in bullet E that the federal match will be 90% for the calendar quarters in 2020 and each year thereafter. So that's as good as any other promise that the federal government has ever provided us for anything regarding Medicaid and Medicare. Okay, so in order for them to retract or to rescind their promise to match at 90%, it would require legislation that amends the Social Security Act. Okay, it's as good a promise as we've got, in my opinion, on anything else. So that's Medicaid expansion, and I'm going to pivot and talk to you a little bit more about the Cherokee Inn Hospital, but I want to pause just a second and see if there's anything Steve wanted to say or underscore before I move on to talk specifically about the Cherokee Hospital.
No.
All right, thanks. Okay, so again, I'm the CEO of the Cherokee Indian Hospital. We're about a $100 million a year organization with a little over 700 employees. Many of you know our health system, but I want to talk to you a little bit more about some additions that we made recently. We have a presence in Swain County, Jackson County, Graham County, and Cherokee County. And this past summer, we opened a brand new 80,000 square foot crisis stabilization unit. It is a 14-bed locked facility for patients who are in acute behavioral health crises. Now,
Where is that?
it is actually now contiguous with our existing hospital.
Okay.
Yep. This was a phase 2 of our master plan. Commissioner Woody, this actually, for your reference, this new facility sits exactly on the same spot that the old IHS service unit sat on. So you remember the old hospital. So the second floor of this structure is a 14-bed crisis stabilization unit with 4 additional high acuity beds for patients that are in extreme crisis. And we have been able to, with the good fortune and support of the Eastern Band, we've been able to essentially unplug ourselves from the state mental health system. And I know that you're familiar with the difficulties and the challenges, the burden it puts on Steve and his ER staff, the burden it puts on your sheriff's department, the burden it puts on your communities and your constituents. The mental health system is just horrible in North Carolina, right? It is. So, Coach, I'm sorry you reminded me of this, but if you go to the high school at Smoky Mountain High School and you look in the trophy case, you'll see that the very first state champion in wrestling in Jackson County is Albert Heartline. And many of you know that last year, after having 4 admissions and 4 72-hour holds in hospitals for mental health crisis, Albert eventually took his own life. The mental health system in this state is in horrible shape. So what we did with tribal support, there was no federal dollars in this at all. There was no federal dollars in the construction of it, and I'm going to talk to you about the operating budget, but we were able to unplug ourselves from the state mental health system. So as patients come into our ER, we have our own crisis response team that is co-located in the ER. We take care of these patients. We call a magistrate if we have to, if they need to have an involuntary commitment or a custody order. And then within less than an hour, we can move them through a secured corridor, up a secured elevator, put them onto a secured unit where they are protected from harming themselves or anyone else, put them to bed, give them a meal, and then tomorrow get them into therapy if they're ready, right? And we can do all that right there. The other thing I'll say to you is that when we built this facility, we forecasted our volumes, and based on our volumes, the distribution of our volumes, we built it at the 75th percentile of what our normal distribution of volume was. So in essence, we overbuilt it knowing that we were going to be limited in the footprint. We have the capacity to be a significant partner to our partners in the region. We could start providing Steve some relief immediately to his patients in the ER. We could start providing relief to the sheriff's departments, et cetera. But they have to have a payer source. The federal government allows us to extend eligibility to non-natives. We just can't be, we cannot use federal appropriation to provide that care. They have to have a payer source. And we could do that, and we want to do that. We want to be a partner in the region. In addition to that, we built really robust center-based group and individual and family therapy services. And we also have now, we've got one of the first medication-assisted therapy programs in this part of the state. We also, with all the tribal money, we built a $14 million 20-bed residential treatment facility in Graham County. So this is long and short-term residential treatment that's located on some trust property out there in the Snowbird community with room for 10 male and 10 females. And we have the opportunity to expand, and we think that we have capacity that we could make available to our neighbors and our family members here in Western North Carolina who are non-native if they had coverage. And we just recently finished construction of our women's and children's homes, a recovery support home for women after long-term treatment as they transition back into the community, and more particularly a safe place for women with children. So why is the Eastern Band doing this? Why is the Eastern Band spending so much of its money? Well, number one, because of its concern for citizenry. But number two, because the Indian health system is horribly underfunded. The Indian Health Service is one of the smallest agencies within Health and Human Services, with an annual operating budget of about $6 billion for the entire country. Now, compare that to the state Medicaid budget in North Carolina, which is approximately $16 billion. We're talking about over 550 tribes in the country. This data shows you that Indian Health Service is funded at about 1/3 of Medicare spend and about half of what the national healthcare expenditure is per capita. Okay. So that's why the Eastern Band is putting so much money into its own health system. But the Cherokee Indian Hospital Authority has become very dependent on third-party reimbursement, specifically Medicaid and Medicare. And the reason is that Congress intended, and I'm going to explain this to you in a minute, it was Congress's intent to recognize the underfunding and provide relief by allowing Indian health systems to bill Medicaid and Medicare. But I'm going to talk to you in a minute about the challenge. So why is that? Let me, if you will, just indulge me a couple of minutes to share a little bit of the background. Why is it a legal and moral obligation of the federal government to provide health care for Indians, right? That's a question. This map shows you, these are the 36 successive treaties that were negotiated between the Cherokee Nation and initially the King of England and then ultimately the United States. And these 36 treaties essentially ceded away the entire land base of the Cherokee Nation. With the one that most of you are going to be most familiar with is the Treaty of New Echota, which is the section labeled number 36. Number 36 at 6 o'clock on your map was the last treaty between the Cherokee Nation and the United States, and it ceded away the remaining amounts of the Cherokee Nation homeland and resulted in the Trail of Tears, which resulted in the forced removal of about 16,000 members of the Cherokee Nation, where about 4,000 perished as a result of the trip, or actually on the trip. This story is repeated over and over again between tribes across this country and the United States, and in more than 22 treaties between American Indian tribes and the United States, healthcare specifically is listed as payment or recompense for the genocide and the atrocities that happened to American Indians. That's the foundation. That's where it comes from. That's why it's a legal and moral obligation of the United States, although it's still in the discretionary budget and continues to be underfunded. There's a long legislative history. I won't go through all these bullets with you, that starting in the treaty period and then ending most recently with the Affordable Care Act. This is long legislative history that reaffirms the United States' responsibility for Indian health care. But on this slide, I want to point out to you those two amendments to the Social Security Act. The first amendment made it possible for Indian health systems to bill CMS, it was HICFA at that time, and receive payment. And then the second amendment sought out to eliminate the burden on the states by promising the states 100% federal match for all of the services provided to American Indians who have Medicaid, as long as that service is provided at or through their health system. All right, so let me say that again. So for every American Indian in North Carolina who has Medicaid, as long as they get their care from me or through me when they get it from Steve, the feds match the state at 100%. There's no cost to the state for that. So here we are. This is where we're stuck. The state has failed to expand Medicaid. It's costing us $7 million a year, and it would cost the state nothing to expand Medicaid for American Indians and Alaska Natives. So this policy decision, if you will, this legislative decision is costing the Eastern Band $7 million a year that we would love to put into workforce development, jobs creation, infrastructure, et cetera. Okay. So let me just kind of wrap up my remarks, and I'll pitch it to Steve by just addressing these again. I told you I'm terribly overt about this, but these are the misunderstandings, right? That taxpayer dollars are going to be spent on these childless, able-bodied adults who choose not to work, and it's not true. The data proves that it's not true. The other misconception is that the state match is unaffordable and it's not sustainable. It's not true. The data proves it. The governor's budget spells it out. And then finally, the 90% federal match might go away. I guess it could in theory, but it would require bills be passed in the House and the Senate, and then ultimately the law passed to amend the Social Security Act. So the promise to provide the 90% federal match, I would argue, is as solid and reliable as the Medicaid and Medicare programs are today. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have after Steve has a chance to share some remarks.
Well, thanks, Casey, and thanks to you all for having me here today. I would echo Casey's sentiments. You know, our systems are different, but they're complementary and there's tremendous commonality. We serve a common overlapping population. We serve people who, in many cases, are predisposed to not being healthy, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll say that there's no doubt that Harris Regional Hospital and Swain Community Hospital would benefit from Medicaid expansion. The low range of the estimate for our hospitals is about $2.4 million annually. And so those are resources that we can then deploy into expanding services, offering new programs, recruiting more doctors. That's particularly important here in rural Western North Carolina because we're the only hospital outside of the Cherokee Indian Hospital in our service area. So our primary service area is Jackson, Swain, Macon, and Graham counties. Population of a little bit more than 100,000 people. And over the past 7 years, we're the only hospitals that have expanded services during that period of time. We have people who are often driving an hour or more to get to us, and we're the closest destination. And so as we have expanded things like cardiology to offer invasive and interventional cardiology. We hired last fall the only neonatologist that's practicing west of Asheville. We've expanded OB and orthopedics, both in terms of the number of providers and geographic locations around the region. That's critically important because if we don't do it, there's no one else to do it. And the people that we all serve often go without health care. It's not just an issue of they go somewhere else. Some people, if they're lucky, will do that. It's an issue of they don't get health care. So as we pursue our mission of making communities healthier, Medicaid expansion is central to that. So while I would make the financial argument, sure, it's going to benefit our hospitals, I would make a more fundamental argument. And this is really about helping people who need help. That's what, in my view, Medicaid expansion is all about. If you look at the population that we serve and the social determinants of health, almost across the board, our population is on the wrong side of those. And the reason I'm passionate about that is I grew up in an environment right here where I was on the wrong side of that. And so I want to see people get on the right side of that. To give you some data around that, in our primary service area, again, those 4 counties, education levels are lower than the state average. 20% in the case of people with a bachelor's degree or higher. Even more telling, though, is that the proportion of people under 65, and Casey touched on this, but to put a specific number to it, without health insurance in those 4 counties is 44% higher than the state average. The median household income is 18% lower than the state average, and people living in poverty, the proportion of people living in poverty is 24% higher than the state average. So to Casey's point, these are the people we serve are not deadbeats as some people would have you believe. They're people who need access to health care. They're people who need to be given a chance to live better and healthier lives. At Harrison Swain, we have over 6,000 people a year, more than 20% of the total, who come through our emergency departments and they don't have health insurance. That's more than double the rate of people with Medicaid who receive other services. So what that tells you is that we have a disproportionate number of people coming through our emergency departments who are truly in crisis. It could be in a behavioral health crisis, but more often than not, they're in a medical crisis. They have waited to the very last minute to get any form of health care. And I'm here to tell you, I'm proud of the work that our emergency departments do. They're great people, but that's not where primary care is supposed to be delivered. That's not supposed to be the place that you go when you absolutely have been forced to neglect your health care because you don't have coverage and you can't otherwise afford it. So Medicaid expansion will allow these folks to get plugged into our healthcare system at the right time and receive care, including preventive services, so long before there's a crisis. And that's incredibly important to the communities we serve. So I think the question around Medicaid expansion is really one of having the will to insist on better for our friends and neighbors. And there needs to be a lot of political will around that. Certainly our hospitals as safety net hospitals would benefit. Our communities would benefit. There would be more jobs created by Medicaid expansion, lots of data about that. And there would be more investment on the part of our hospitals in the form of more doctors, more services, new programs, all those things that are important. But more important is that a significant number of people who just can't get plugged into the healthcare system would be able to be plugged in and be given a chance to live better lives. And I think that's the fundamental thing that we need to be focused on with Medicaid expansion. And I would be happy to answer any questions, but encourage you to support this resolution. Thanks.
Any questions by the board members for either one of these gentlemen?
Thanks for the education.
Absolutely.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Well, I know, go ahead, sir.
Slow down, Coach.
Thank y'all for what you do, and, y'all very important to us. We're real proud of you, Steve.
Well, thank you.
But then I went back to Cal Raleigh, and I was very proud of you, Casey. I remember running around with sisters. One, two, five. It's so good to see these fellas do well, in their community, and do the things you do. Thank you for that. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Um,
My pleasure.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wood.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. I appreciate so much. I mentioned to Mr. Heatherly that I had 4 children born in, at Harris Regional in Jackson County. And I have a dear friend who lives in Macon County, and her grandchildren are being born in Georgia, in Clayton, Georgia, because they don't have someone delivering babies. And I thought, they're not even born in our state. So for the rest of their lives, when they have to fill out that form, where were you born? Georgia. No. But I.
Dodge, I'm George.
I'm so sorry, Don.
So am I.
But anyway, I do deeply appreciate what you all do to serve our community. But more than that, we are, as commissioners, are to serve the community for the health and well-being of our citizens. And this whole healthcare issue is vital to being able to fulfill that responsibility.
Other comments?
Well,
Go ahead,
will
Commissioner.
this resolution get to all of our legislatures inside the General Assembly?
Commissioner Jones, if I could,
Please.
at Swain County, they actually passed a motion to adopt the resolution on their own letterhead, and in the motion specified they would send it to the representatives. As an example.
I would just simply say that I don't know that, in the years that I've been a commissioner, I don't know that we've ever had an issue come before this board that has been explained and the case built more compelling to support a resolution than what's been presented here today. And I know it is not on our agenda today. This was just a presentation, but we do have the companion resolution here in the packet. And I would suspend the rules and make a motion that we add this to the agenda for debate and consideration today under our legislative portion. I'm assuming this would be resolution R21-25, would that be correct? So I would just make a motion that we add this to today's agenda for consideration, resolution R21-25, which is the resolution in support of closing North Carolina health insurance gap. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any question or discussion? This is just to add it to the agenda for debate and consideration later on.
Anything else we do, that would be straight.
If you did this, I think this would be significant. I will tell you this without getting too long. So it's in the governor's budget, but it's not in the House version of the budget. My understanding is it may not be in the Senate version. There's a slim chance that it'll show up in a conference report. Our intent is to send a message to Senator Corbin and Representatives Gillespie and Clampett that we appreciate you and it's okay. We get it now. It's okay to support expansion. That's the intent. Let's send the message to them.
Yes.
Thank you for being fiscally conservative, but now is the time and we appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments concerning the motion to place it on the agenda for consideration? And all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Okay, we'll take this up today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Next is item 3, fireworks display. Mr. Adams, are you going to present this item?
Yes, sir. Mr. Elder, unable to attend today. He is assisting some of his children were moving, and so I told him that, he didn't need to drive all the way back to Jackson County for standard procedure. So
Absolutely.
you can see, WCU plans to have a fireworks show, after the home opener, on September 4th. This is a show that's, happened before. The sites that's selected to shoot the fireworks is the same site as previous. And so it really is just mandated to come before the board, for approval.
Do you have any idea who they play, Commissioner Deeds?
You know, you know who the player?
Eastern Kentucky, I hear every year.
Yeah, Eastern Kentucky.
WCU, yes, sir.
I knew it was somebody out of state.
There's probably more fireworks than that.
Okay, we've got the request, item 3. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move that we accept this request as presented.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any question or discussion? Madam Clerk, if you call the roll.
Commissioner Stridley,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Woody,
Yes.
Commissioner Dees,
Yes.
Chairman McMahon.
Yes, motion carries. Next is item 4, which is our food service and kitchen management services contract. Mr. Adams?
Yes, sir. This is an item that's been discussed before the board, for a couple of meetings now. Close in your packets is the proposed, requested agreement between Jackson County and Skillet to provide food services for both our jail operations and our Department on Aging.
Is there a motion in order for item 4?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman, to approve the contract as presented.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any question or discussion? All right, if not, then Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Dees,
Yes.
Commissioner Woody,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Stridley,
Yes.
Chairman McMahon.
Yes, motion carries. Next is item 5, public school security upgrades. Mr. Adams?
Yes, sir. I'll just, turn it back over. This is something discussed with the board in regards to, the proposed cost and contract with Canning and Sons to provide upgrades to the schools. Again, it was discussed at the work session, what's being, if any action is taken by the board today, the requested action would be to approve the, basically the utilization of Article 40, 42, and 46 sales tax to fund the proposed contract with Canning and Sons.
So would, we would be approving the contract, we just approving the expenditure of the funds.
You're approving expenditure funds. I would add, just in case something popped up, that you're authorized the county management with approval of determined to follow through with any other necessary items to approve the contract. And then this would also have to be approved by, obviously, the Board of Education. Board of Education have to follow through with the approval of the contract and also approval of utilization of Articles 40 and 42 sales tax.
Is there a motion in order on item 5? Well, I will move forward and propose a motion that we accept the request and fund through Articles 40, 42, 46, the school capital safety enhancements has been requested, and authorize staff to proceed forward with other, whatever else may come about that requires them to authorize. Is there a second?
No, second.
Any question or discussion?
I've discussed this a whole lot with myself. I've not come to a conclusion with myself yet. There's a lot of money for this project. This is an important project. Anytime we deal with our kids, it's probably the most important thing we do. But you got to put stuff in perspective. I bet it came, by hell, irritated about some of this cost. I've talked to the contractors about it, and some of them said, well, I wish I'd have known, I could have, I'm not gonna have part of that money. And then the question was, well, how did you decide? What kind of wall do you? We built a metal wall or a, what do you call it, Brian?
Wrought iron.
Wrought iron wall. My question was, well, somebody should build a wrought iron wall. He says, well, how long do you think it takes to put a 5-foot ladder up on a wall? It's gonna burn you, you know? But I feel like, when I ran for county commissioner, there's fellows made a point that we got a $50 million budget. And what the hell do you know about a $50 budget, $50 million budget? Well, I'm gonna tell you what I knew about a $50 million budget. I didn't know anything about a $50 million. My wife's budget is that. Oh, yeah. And but this is our, you know, I'm very conscious how much money we spend on what we spend it on. And I really think the school board in particular, because they're in a kind of different situation, because they ask for things that need to be done, and we try to come up and spend that money that way. But I'd like to think there's someone that when a bid comes back in, if it's the low bid, looks at that bid and says, God darn, that seems awful high for that. They're gonna ask us questions, the board might be prepared to answer questions about why that's so expensive. And I even talked to our architect today. And he said, you know, I'm kind of bumfuzzled on it. I don't really have an answer for you on why some of that was pretty darn expensive. So that's some of the questions that I've had about it. And I guess I continue to have about it. And I'm gonna vote for it, of course. But I'm not gonna vote for it because I'm threatened to feel like, you know, if I don't vote for it, somebody's gonna lose their life, or because there's all kinds of things we vote for every day. That, you know, if we didn't vote for it, I'm concerned about the darn walkway coming up Skyline Drive, or I would see somebody run over up there. But we can't start blaming Brian Birch or somebody that, you know, if we don't get done, we've worked hard, tried to push to get that done. We've tried to help the school system be more secure the last 2 or 3 years. And, I think the sheriff sitting back there, we've added officers into each one of the schools to help that counselor to counsel the kids that has problems and things of that nature, so we don't need to apologize, but I think we all should be more conscious of the money we're spending. Just because we got it don't mean, you know, we got it, so let's spend it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. And I will say, unfortunately, Commissioner Deeds, I do 100% agree with you. I think that it's an exorbitant amount of money. When you look at what's being proposed and the contract and the cost. And we, as you said, and I don't want to get into a debate about the value of our children and the cost of the wall and that whole debate. But just when you look at the construction side of it alone, it is expensive. And I wish it was cheaper. I agree 100% with you. I wish it was extremely a lot cheaper. But it is, unfortunately, it is what it is, given the nature of how government works and how we got to have architects and engineers and the bid process and all the red tape that goes along with government. And if there was a way that we could change that and make it easier and cheaper, and every one of us would vote to do that. And I appreciate all the work that's gone into it from the staff, but there has been an extreme amount of labor from a staff perspective, from building code to the schools, to department instruction, to code enforcement, to the fire service, to law enforcement. I mean, we could go on and on and on and on about the hours that have been spent trying to make sure that this product is what it needed to be. And all these requirements have been met to get us to where we're at today. And unfortunately, it's $7 million. So,
And always remember, if you spent $5.2 million, that'd be $2 million that still could be spent on kids, not
That's
spent
right.
on something else. And I'm sure there's
Right.
$2 million that could be spent in this school system on other things, and we all know what they are.
Well, I was teaching at Smoky Mountain High School when, and this had been talked about for years, when my children went there, and it never happened, about our Fine and Performing Arts Center. And there was a public outcry of why spend money on this auditorium with such wonderful amenities that we could do these productions, which if anyone has been to those, are amazing. And we have to give kudos to Linda Hager and her dedication to that program. And being a teacher of fine arts, I didn't have a problem with spending that money. But I know some people did. And in thinking about these walls, and I'm like Commissioner Deeds, I've thought a lot about it, and I just keep thinking about how that money could be spent for direct services to children and what that could mean to our kids. And I want to just ask this question, which I'm sure you've asked, but if we waited several months, went to where some of this crisis of building and lack of supplies and money and lack of workers, is there a chance that we could do this for less? Because I remember Mr. Buchanan saying, when he went and asked these questions about the cost, it was labor. Is that correct? That was a big part of that?
Well, not just the cost, but that was part of the problem while we had so few bids the first time.
Okay.
When we went out,
Yes.
was that the number of projects that were being all gone out at the same time.
Right.
And-
Okay.
And the
Lack of-
ability to secure enough labor to go out and
Okay.
the project.
Yeah. Is there, and I know we don't have a crystal ball, we can't predict the future, but is there a sense in that waiting might enable other people to bid on it, and we would get a more reasonable?
Well, I know Commissioner Jones has offered that comment as well. That maybe, there's some discussion and could it potentially be a little cheaper if we held off. But then I also offered the comment if our federal plan passes Congress, which it is on target to happen, and we have this major infrastructure
yeah.
bill,
Yeah.
then we see costs of certain
Yes, that's
of
true.
product and labor shortage intensifying. So
That's-
it could be that if you hold off and wait, it could come back that a $7.4 million improvement could cost 9.4, or who knows what. I mean,
Yes, I see what you're saying. That's-
nobody has the crystal
Nobody
ball.
knows, you're right.
And I recall Mr. Buchanan mentioning that he had talked to somebody, I believe, in the Asheville area regarding concrete costs in the future. And it might go down, possibly go down 5%. 5% of $7 million is $300,000. $300,000 is a lot of money, but, and so it's 7.4, but I've changed my delay tactic to let's move forward and keep our children safe.
I talked to Mr. Smith, and he said the quickest, fastest, most cheapest way to build a wall is precast concrete. Then he qualified that and said, you can't get precast concrete right now. It's such a demand and it's sky high, and that's the time, there'll be a time you can, but I mean, you can cast that off off-site, bring it in, put it up, you know, and then still put a face on it like they're wrong. Anyway, so there's not a
There's,
answer for that.
okay, thank you,
It would,
thank you for.
that anybody can do it.
Well, it's kind of a spell thing too, if you put it off, and something happens,
Yeah.
you're gonna be awful sorry. You know, it is a lot of money,
It is.
but like. Coach
Now, when you
says,
put it up, that don't mean something can't happen either.
That's true too.
I guarantee you, when we get that up, the contractor's not gonna write a contract, write us a thing or something. Guarantee you that nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah,
We understand.
the only thing guaranteed in life, taxes and death.
Ben Franklin said that.
Yep. That's the only guarantee you got.
Well, thank you for listening.
Any other comments or questions from the board members? I know this is a lot of money and we all struggle with it.
Good news is that people of Jackson, citizens of Jackson County, put in 2016 a fourth of a penny sales tax for future
Yes.
capital projects. So we do have a revenue stream that we eventually will get that pool capital money back for the other much needed projects for our school system.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're very fortunate to have that. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be here where we're at right now. We'll be talking about fund balance. Any other comments or questions? Motion and a second's on the floor then, so Madam Clerk, call it.
Commissioner Strickland,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Woody,
Yes.
Commissioner Deeds, Chairman McMahon.
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you. We will follow up. Mr. Buchanan will follow up with school board and proceed forward.
Good. Next is item 6, the approved final bid for lot BB, Waterfall Cove, Ms. Baker.
Yes, so your policy of having us send this out to the neighboring property owners has really paid off. If you remember on June 1st, we had 5 offers from Neil and Neola and Agrabide Inc. And of those 5 offers that you accepted, and we then sent, or your clerk sent letters out to every adjoining property owner of all 5, which was about 25 to 30 letters. I think I got at least 25 phone calls. I think I probably talked to every neighbor of every one of those properties. It's the first time that that's happened. I usually get 1 or 2. But as it worked out on this one, 3 of those properties went through with no upset bid, even though I had calls on them. So 3 of them have closed. They've actually been reported, all of that's done. 2 of them, we got upset bids on, more than 1 upset bid on the 2 remaining. 1 of those is still going. I got an upset bid this morning, actually.
Wow.
So that one is still going. This one has concluded. This is the lot BB on Lake Shore Drive, the one where you can in the aerial see the lake, but you can't suppose it from the lot. This one I did get a couple of upset bids on, but that ended up at 10,000. The original bid was just under 5,100, so it almost doubled in this amount. Because usually I just see them bid in increments of the minimum bid, which is like a few $100s more. But this person came on in and bid 10,000. So this is the final bid. We went 10 days without an upset bid after we ran this one in the paper. So since it's not the original bid, it now comes back to you for motion to approve the final bid, which is this 10,000. And I think they're ready to close this week if we can, if this moves forward. So that's what it is.
Having heard this explanation from our attorney, what's the pleasure of the board concerning this bid?
We accept. I move.
All right, have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any question or discussion?
Is this buyer an adjacent to the lot he wants to buy?
In process. He was, and actually, this one ended up coming from, coming off of our website, if you saw it. And I did get calls from some of the surrounding property owners, and they did bid as well. But he is in process of buying a house that adjoins this, neighbors this, and this will actually help him with what he's trying to do in remodeling that house. So he was really anxious to get it, and it's working with another one of the neighbors who was interested in bidding on it. I think there's a well on here that neighbor uses, and they're working together, so it actually worked out well for the neighbors.
So what was the commission that Baker Realty Group got off this?
You
Just
already
kidding.
paid that.
Baker Realty Group.
She's doing this for fun.
Any other questions or comments? Not, Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Deeds?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Sterling?
Yes.
Chairman Knighton?
Yes, motion carries. And then while Ms. Baker is at the podium, item 7 is the sale of surplus real property, and this is a policy that we need to consider.
Yes, this is your policy on selling these surplus properties, and I realize we're doing this one, this policy you adopted in 2017. And I wanted to request that you amend the policy to match how we actually practice it. I've told them all that what we want to see their offers contain is that you would present them a non-warranty deed instead of a special warranty deed. And the difference is that with a special warranty deed, you're warranting the title since the county became the owner, not going back in time as a general warranty deed would do, but since we became the owner. But on these tax foreclosed lots, we don't even go and look at them. We don't search the title again. We don't know anything about them. So I always requested that we do a non-warranty deed. I would prefer a quit claim deed, but I know that can mess their title insurance up, and we don't want to do that. But the non-warranty deed just says we're not warranting anything about the title. I warn everybody that calls me about this and that what we do and don't do with the lots, and encourage them to check them out. And they've all been non-warranty deeds when the offers come in, because that's what I tell them. And I just wanted to request that the policy be updated to reflect that instead of the special warranty deed.
You've heard the request from our attorney. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move,
Oh, go ahead.
I move that we accept this proposal.
Okay, have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any question or discussion? All right, Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Sterling?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Deeds?
Yes.
Chairman Knighton?
Yes, motion carries. Let's take about a 5-10 minute recess.
That's a good thing.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the agenda item.
Okay, we'll come back to order. Pick back up where we left off. Legislation, item 8 is our Agricultural Advisory Board Ordinance Amendment. We had a public hearing prior to the start of this meeting. We received no public comment. And now we're in position to ratify those amendments that have been suggested by staff. Any additional comments, Ms. Baker?
No, I don't have anything else.
All right, is there a motion to approve item 8?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any question or discussion? Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Deeds,
Yes.
Commissioner Woody,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Strickland,
Yes.
Chairman McMahon.
Yes, motion carries. Next is item 9. This is order of collection, the resolution R 21-23. We recognize Ms. Henson to highlight the request.
So this is the yearly order of collection that allows me and my office to collect, levy on, and sell real and personal property for the upcoming tax year.
Okay. We have a motion to approve this order.
I move that we approve this order.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any question or discussion about the order? This is a standardized process. Hearing none then, Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Strickland,
Yes.
Commissioner Jones,
Yes.
Commissioner Woody,
Yes.
Commissioner Deeds,
Yes.
Chairman McMahon.
Yes, motion carries. Next is item 10. This is the Connor G. Burrell Highway Resolution, the resolution R 21-24. Commissioner Jones, I'll recognize you.
We do have necessary letters from 3 entities, the Rotary, the SCC, the Cashers Chamber of Commerce, and the family, as well as a $2,000 check for construction of the sign. And it begins there at the white concrete bridge on 107 in District 3 and runs into District 4 and stops at the Moody Bridge. Do I need to read this resolution?
If you'd like to, or whatever you want to proceed.
We'll go ahead and read the resolution. Jackson Resolution 21-24, whereas Conrad G. Burrell, 1935 to 2019, became a board member for the 14th Transportation Division in 2000. In this position, he oversight of 10 counties in the westernmost part of North Carolina and was instrumental in the construction of numerous transportation projects in Jackson County and Division 14. And whereas Conrad received the Order of the Longleaf Pine 2 times, the highest civilian honor awarded in North Carolina. And whereas Conrad was a board member at Southwestern Community College for 20 years, serving as chairman of the board for 12. He served as a board member at Harris Regional Hospital for 15 years and also served as a board member at Advantage West. Whereas Conrad was elected as Registrar of Deeds for Jackson County in 1974 and served for 24 years. And whereas Conrad was elected as a county commissioner and served from 1998 until 2002, and then served as an appointed commissioner from 2005 until 2006. And whereas Conrad was a member of the Silver Rotary, having served as secretary, treasurer, and president at various times. Now therefore be it resolved in appreciation for his distinguished service, Jackson County Board of Commissioners hereby respectfully request that North Carolina Board of Transportation rename a portion of NC 107 starting at the intersection of SR 1172 Moody Bridge Road to the intersection of NC 107 and SR 1002 Old Cullowhee Road, Conrad G. Burrell Highway.
We heard the presentation. Is there a motion in order concerning this resolution?
I make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any question or discussion or comments?
Yes.
Mr. D.
Yeah, I do have a comment about this. I've had a comment about everything recently. See, Steve? I don't like the way this come about. I think it's very just a very darn political thing. I think it's, Mr. Burrow is a very political person. I don't know if he appreciated being this political, if this is the kind of, maybe it's just to me. This first was brought about by citizens of this community, and it's been pushed by citizens of this community, just continually. He can go to my sister's houses and everywhere else trying to get my ratification of this. We had one commissioner that brought this up, and then he wasn't even here when we voted on it. And matter of fact, he wasn't here hardly at all at last year that he is a commissioner here. But that he is the one that initiated this. If you go over in Robbinsville, they got a road over there called Rodney Orr Highway. If you don't know who Rodney Orr is, he was a NASCAR fella. Got killed by named highway accident. I don't think they came to Jackson County and got us to endorse that or pay, put up that, whatever. We've got people in Graham County that's paying to get this stuff installed. I believe I'm correct about that. I've been told that or. I don't think the county commissioners had any involvement when they named the Burrow building that there after Mr. Burrow. I wouldn't think they did, or the town or anyone else. That was the Board of Trustees decision to do that. It was a good decision. They named it one of the most prominent buildings in the county after him and put his portrait up there, whatever. But for some reason now, Southwest Community College thinks that they should be part of endorsing this and pushing for a highway to be named after him also. I just think it stinks. I had a daughter to die, and Mr. Burrow and his wife was one of the first people to come see me. And I don't forget it. And I coached his son-in-law. I know his daughter well, went to church with him. I think this is out of place. But I guess when you make a lot of promises, you have to carry through with them. That's one reason I've tried as a commissioner not to make a lot of promises to people that fail. Support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other comments? Madam Clerk, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Deeds?
No.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Strickland?
Yes.
Chairman McMahon?
Yes, motion carries 4-1. Next is item 11, which is resolution R21-25. This is the item that we added to the agenda earlier in the meeting. You can find the resolution under tab number 2. This is the resolution that Mr. Cooper and Mr. Heatherly both spoke about. We have a draft copy of it, like I said, under tab number 2. If you want to turn over to the last page in tab number 2 to review the resolution. And I'm just going to, since this is something that we're taking up view for the first time, and it's a little bit different than what we normally do in our procedures, I'm going to read this resolution and offer it here today for our consideration. Resolution R21-25, resolution in support of closing North Carolina's health insurance gap, whereas healthy citizens and access to affordable health care are key to the Jackson County economy, and whereas closing the health care insurance coverage gap would extend insurance to approximately 3,299 uninsured individuals in Jackson County and 750,000 across the entire state. And whereas closing the health insurance coverage gap would drive new business and healthcare activity in Jackson County and could create up to 263 new jobs. And whereas this particularly benefits small businesses, healthcare providers, and individuals, and supports a thriving economy with healthy productive workforce, and whereas federal funding will cover 90% of the cost for states closing the health insurance coverage gap to citizens who need access to affordable health insurance. Therefore, be it resolved that the Jackson County Board of Commissioners urges the North Carolina General Assembly to close the health insurance coverage gap in North Carolina. This resolution shall be effective on and after its passage and shall be shared with the members of the Jackson County General Assembly delegation, if adopted today. And I also would like to say that, and I think it was a comment that Mr. Cooper made, that if this resolution were to be adopted, that we'd also be transmitted to the General Assembly officially, but especially to our members of the delegation that represent Jackson County. And I would put that in the form of a motion for consideration today. Is there a second for the resolution?
Second.
Now, questions or comments? Let's take an opportunity to, if there are any, to cover this.
Anything else we do, this is important.
It is.
This is really important.
I know that there has been some positive bipartisan support for this for our region, and I'm pleased to see that. So I think that our doing this as commissioners here in Jackson County will hopefully help our representatives who will be making this decision see that we really support this.
I would add one other thing. I know they probably have it, but it would probably be a bad idea to include a cover letter with this resolution with these facts and the presentation that Mr. Cooper provided with us today, just as supporting evidence behind why we adopted the resolution. Other comments or questions? Madam Clerk, you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Strickland?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Dees?
Yes.
Chairman Knight?
Yes, motion carries. Next is our appointments. Item 11. What do we have here? Agricultural Advisory Board. Wow.
Wow.
All right. Isn't that sort of ironic? So Heather, what does that mean for the people who serve now then?
Well, now, after the approved change to the ordinance, you can reappoint them. And I think Mr. Stevens' letter has that designated there for you, but you can move forward with that.
So I think at this point, Commissioner Strickland, I know we had one time talked about Chet Stevens.
Right.
For District 3.
Mm-hmm.
You have,
Nope, I think he's just on standby.
okay. All right, so you'll make that as a form of a motion today?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll go ahead and get yours taken care of. And then we have these other at-large positions as well.
Yeah, and his letter, I'm not sure, of course, he's not here, but he's showing Neil Dawson to the open District 3. And then I think that Chet Stevens was currently serving in an at-large position, and that would leave him. But if you switch those, that would be fine as well. So, yeah.
Okay. All right, so Commissioner Strickland has moved that we appoint Chet Stevens as District 3 representative. And we have a letter saying that Neil Dawson is willing to serve as an at-large. Do we have any other additional names? Please.
He's got here Charles Fowler to the at-large seat that was
John
held.
Brown.
Yeah, and John Brown.
But Kent Cochran is there.
No,
Trying to decipher this again. I don't see Kent's name anywhere.
Well, I think, what Barry has is for Charles Fowler was willing to be appointed to the at-large seat that was held by Kent Cochran.
Okay, I see that now. I see Kent's name. So Charles Fowler, Chet Stevens, John Brown, and Neil Dawson. That's the name, 4 names we need, right?
Yes.
All right, so you're willing to put that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Okay, all right, we have a motion. Neil Dawson, Charles Fowler, John Brown, and Chet Stevens, with Chet Stevens being the District 3 appointee, the others at large. And I'll second that. All right, any other question or discussion? Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Deeds?
Yep.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Stridlin?
Yes.
Chairman Knight?
Yes, motion carries. Thanks, Lily. Item 12. This one is for the Business and Industry Advisory Committee. Got a letter here from Mike Byers. He's been serving on that.
And he suggests he suggests our former
Yes,
economic development person.
to be his replacement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I read.
We got this.
You have to go through
You have
about
to dig
3
through the email,
letters,
that's
yeah. And then Dr. Brown affirmed that that would be good.
Okay, so would you like to do that before we move?
Okay. Like,
Rich Price.
I would like to move that we appoint Rich Price as the representative from WCU to the Business and Industry Advisory Committee.
And we will have to search for an SCC appointee, is that correct?
SEC, they're working on
They're trying to
his
get,
suggestion.
okay, all right, thank you. Now, I guess I should ask the question too, just to make sure all the names that we just voted on for agriculture, are okay.
Yes, that's
And likewise with Mr. Price.
Well, now, he was an employee. Does that mean he passed a background check?
When he got hired, he passed the background check.
So it should be okay to go ahead and vote on that one.
I think, yeah, it should be. I mean, he's gone through background, but if you stuck with the policy, you'd wait until he fill out the
Fill it
application
out.
and then do the background check. But,
Maybe we
Just-
should, because just for continuity.
I mean, what do y'all thought? I mean,
Well, he probably did when he
went
just
to
got hired at Western, yeah.
WCU, I'm sure
Oh,
he went through
sure.
a background check there too.
Oh,
You know we have to do that.
You have to have a drug test and
Yeah,
all
I'm
that.
good. Yeah, he's,
Okay,
yeah.
all right, well, we'll move
Okay.
forward with this appointment then.
Sure.
All right, any other questions or comments? Madam Clerk, you call the roll on that one?
Commissioner Stridlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Deeds? Chairman Knight?
Yes, motion carries. Historic Preservation Commission.
I would like to make a request, that is the person representing my district, and I would like to delay that. I am reaching out to, the Cherokee Historic and to see if there's a enrolled member that would be willing to serve.
Okay.
And I think that's a big part of our historical
Absolutely.
heritage
We'll
in
carry that
Jackson
one over
County.
then.
So they're getting back to me.
And the Jury Commission, item 14. Have a letter here from Ann Melton, our Clerk of Superior Court, asking that we consider Norma Clayton to be reappointed to serve another term. So what's the pleasure of the board concerning Norma's appointment?
Should be great.
Okay, so Commissioner Deeds puts that in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Question or discussion?
Mhm.
Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Deeds?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Stridlin?
Yes.
Chairman Knight?
Yes, motion carried. Mr. Adams, we have a need for closed session?
Yes, sir, we do. We have
Wrong
need
answer.
for real property and criminal investigations.
Oh, dear.
Real property and criminal investigations, that's 143, 311, 5 and A7. Have a motion to go into closed session concerning those?
You want the PIN number?
Yeah, and the staff will provide the PIN number to whomever.
The PIN number is 7559197471.
All right, so you've heard the PIN number, which would be included with the motion for the real property. Have a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We'll give them a chance to get the cameras off and we'll read your thing.
Bye, Darlene. Bye.
Darlene,
Yes, sir.
you're doing good.
She's been waiting all day.